And so there was an app like that, which I really wanted, but also I was a student and I was cheap. So I figured I would just build that myself. It wasn't anything close to becoming a millionaire, but it definitely was enough to cover my study expenses. At that time, I also wanted to find out like how much time I actually spent developing that, but I also wasn't disciplined enough to start and stop timers all day to measure the time. I realized after releasing version 2 that was quite a risky move, 13 months of, just investing in that one thing without knowing whether it will work. Subscriptions are the only way these days to really sustain development, and everything else is just like twice as difficult. A large portion of the code that I create these days is not handwritten but written by AI.
All right, folks. Hi, and welcome to a new episode of The Marco Show. Today, the topic is going to be how to turn from a FANG engineer to running your own software business. In this case, desktop software, selling desktop software. I'm excited to learn how you can do that. And I've got a great guest with me today. Hello, welcome, and who are you?
Hi, Marco. I'm Daniel. I live here in Munich, and I make two Mac apps called Timing and Cotypist. Timing is an automatic time tracking app, which kind of tells you what you've been doing on your Mac all day, how much time you spend on Facebook and whatever, but also how much time you spend working.
Right.
So, which is very helpful for especially freelancers to build their time, and if they forget to start and stop a timer, they can afterwards just see what they did and invoice that. And lately, I've also been spending a lot of time on my new app, Cotypist, which is like an AI autocomplete tool. So essentially, it's a bit like a GitHub Copilot or a Cursor tab, but in pretty much any text field on your Mac. So you just type naturally, and it will suggest how you want to complete that sentence. Sometimes the completions are very good. Sometimes they are not very good at all. And yeah, trying to build that out.
Right, cool. And we're going to get into these two products in a bit. I wanted to start at the beginning. I already gave it kind of away. You went to uni, and then I think you went straight to Google. Was that it?
Yes, correct.
And you worked there as a software engineer?
Yeah.
Right. And then what happened? What kind of inspired you to think, hey, right, maybe that's not it. I want to do something else. Maybe there are some products on the horizon I want to get into.
Yeah, good question. So let me start at the very beginning. So I've been always doing a bit of programming as a hobby, even when I went to school already. And in fact, when I went to school, I got like for some science competition, Windows Mobile PDA back in the days, which was like 2003 to 2005. And actually there were computer algebra system apps for that. So that's like very advanced graphing calculator stuff. They can differentiate, integrate, and so on. So it's a bit like a TI-83, TI-89, but like essentially as an app on Windows Mobile PDAs, even back before people called them apps. And so there was an app like that, which I really wanted, but also I was a student and I was cheap. So I figured I would just build that myself.
Right. So you couldn't afford it, and you figured, okay, right.
I mean, like in retrospect, I guess I could have afforded it. I mean, I think it was 20 euros or so. But if I had paid that, I guess I wouldn't be here today. So, so yeah, I found like a library for doing calculations like that, which was open source and originally for Linux and a bit for Windows. And I managed to compile that for Windows Mobile and like essentially write an app on top of that could do similar calculations. Essentially, it would just defer to that library for doing a lot of these calculations, and doing a bit of graphs and so on. And I think that was around 2005, 2006. So I think the iPhone wasn't out back then, or the iPhone definitely wasn't out around the time. And then the iPhone came out, the App Store came out. Like there were the first stories of like a gold rush for apps, for mobile apps. And I figured like maybe I could do the same thing again, but this time for the iPhone and like participate a bit in that. So I actually ordered a Mac Mini in summer of 2009, because like my first attempt at doing that was actually downloading the developer SDK onto my Windows machine, and then there was this .dmg file, and I was like, what is this? How it doesn't even execute on my Windows PC. So eventually I did order a Mac Mini specifically for developing, and an iPod Touch actually. And I spent the summer of 2009 pretty much porting that app to the iPhone. And iPod Touch back then, I think that was like iOS 3.2 or iPhone OS, how it was called back then. Developed that, released it on the App Store, and for a student, it did quite well back then.
When you say did quite well, I mean, you actually had quite a few sales coming in for that on a consistent basis. You just published it, and the gold rush kind of seemed to work back then for you.
Yes, I mean, like it wasn't anything close to becoming a millionaire, but it definitely was enough to cover my study expenses. At that time, I also wanted to find out like how much time I actually spent developing that, also to see like, was that worth it, like, or would a different job be better? But I also wasn't disciplined enough to, start and stop timers all day to measure the time. So,
but I need to jump in right real quick, because when I look at developers and people who say they have a side project and they want to do something, often the focus is kind of missing, so that there isn't a focus like in 3 months we're going to port it and we're going to release it. And to me, it seems like, well, we have that, Windows ready app, and then suddenly having that goal, well, I'm going to port it, I'm going to release it, it's going to be in production ready shape. It looks like quite the focus for a student back then to just, do it. How did that come about? I mean, it seems quite disciplined, so to speak.
To be honest, I don't have like a silver bullet for that. Yeah. I mean, like over the summer, we had less stuff to do with our studies anyway. Like lectures end for the semester, and after that you're pretty much on your own anyway. And it also was just a lot of fun, and trying to polish it to see how far I can get with that. I mean, like actually even getting it to run on these hardware constrained devices back then was quite a challenge, or rendering math on these devices. But I mean, like it's been 15 years. I can't say like these were my goals for version 1 and then I'm going to release it. So I think I essentially just started building it until I was satisfied with it or felt like it could provide value, and then released that. I think the very first version for the iPhone didn't even have like charts. I think that came actually quite a bit later. And I mean, also back then I pretty much didn't do any marketing. I like there was like a template website for iPhone apps that was created by a designer, which I kind of adapted.
Right.
Took that, put in my screenshots, created an app store description, took a few screenshots, put it back on the app store. And I mean, like back then there was I think a couple thousand apps in the app store or something like that.
Right.
So back then you didn't need to do more marketing than that.
And did you then just publish it, and did you have like a lot of maintenance to do? Did you release new versions, or was it just like essentially still, okay, you publish it, side project, on with the studies, and then focus on something else meanwhile?
It definitely kept being like a major side project, if that makes sense. So I did create new new versions for it. I think eventually there was a version 2 which did add charts like plots and so on. And I also remember, I think in 2012 I did a big version 3, which took a lot of effort. Like before that, a lot of the formula rendering was essentially getting MathML output, which is like a markup language for describing formulas, from the computer algebra system, and then relying on the iPhone browser's support for rendering that, which wasn't very good, but was still better than creating or rendering those formulas myself, to actually switching to a method for rendering these formulas myself, which also was like far from perfect, but it made a lot of things easier. Like I could use way more native controls, which led to a better experience. And also I mean, for me, for example, I'm not a designer, but for me always the focus was more on trying to like reduce frictions with common interactions. Like for example, I built a custom keyboard, which was essentially just a view in the app to quickly enter formulas, and I did try to like lay the kind of stuff out in a way that makes sense and That means that you can quickly type in numbers and formulas, like essentially the stuff that you would want to do with this kind of app every day.
Right, yeah. And so you were a student, you had a relatively successful side project already, and then I think your studies finished and you thought, well, let's see what the big boys are doing out there. How did you get into Google then?
Good question. So I actually studied mathematics and physics, and I mean, like, I always was a bit more on the computerish side of mathematics. But actually, I didn't think I would have a chance at applying at Apple and Google, because like I didn't know how compiler worked, or like the deep computer science stuff wasn't stuff that I had learned, and was always like I felt a bit self-conscious about that. But I was actually at an iOS developer conference in England, I think in the year when my studies ended, and people there told me, well, just apply for an internship at Apple. I mean, like, what do you have to lose? And could be a cool experience. So, I mean, I did apply after that, and did like 2 phone screens or something like that. And they seemed happy enough with what they were seeing. I mean, at that point, they actually said, you can't apply for an internship because I was about to graduate, and they don't hire graduates for internships because they say you should get a proper job. Then, like, they don't want like the to perpetuate the forever internship concept. And so they actually invited me for interviews for a job in California, in Cupertino. I had like 1 extra day in San Francisco also to accommodate for like 9 hours of time zone difference. And so I asked on Twitter, like, what could I view in San Francisco in a day? And actually, an engineer from Google, who I also met at the same conference where people told me to apply at Apple, he replied and he said, like, here's some things that you can look at. And that actually inspired me to, well, now I applied at Apple. It didn't go that bad so far. So I asked him, well, can you also like submit my resume for applying at Google as well?
Right.
And he did that. So that started a process of similar phone screen on-site interview at Google. In the meantime, I flew to San Francisco, had like a day of interviews in Cupertino. I think they were happy what they were seeing, but they also, like the visa process for that year had already finished anyway. And I also decided that I didn't want to live in the United States, like 9,000 kilometers away from my back then girlfriend, now wife, like ultra long distance relationship and so on. Wouldn't have been, I think it wouldn't have been feasible, and also didn't like attract me that much. And with Apple also you have to give up a lot, like Apple doesn't allow side projects and stuff like that.
Okay.
Or they may have become a little bit less strict about that recently, but back then it was like essentially pretty much impossible.
Right.
Yeah, but so Apple did also try to kind of park me in Paris then, in their Paris office, which also spawned another set of interviews back there. And
in Paris?
In Paris. And in general, the interview process with Apple and like them deciding whether they want to hire someone or so took a very, very long time. Like they were very slow moving. And in the meantime, I had phone screens, on-site interviews in Zurich with Google and a job offer. So when Apple finally decided that they would like to hire me for a position in Paris, I already pretty much had up my mind to move from Bonn, which is by Cologne, to Munich for a position with Google. That's how I ended up in big tech, I guess.
That's an interesting, fascinating story. And actually, by the way, it goes back to the point that was mentioned 2 episodes ago, that, get in touch with people, go to conferences, ask around, maybe, contact your idols or contact random people on Twitter and see maybe something magic happens along the way, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, these days I pretty much don't go to conferences for the tech stuff anymore anyway, because like in a conference talk that is addressed at always like somewhat generic or general audience, right? I mean, even if it's like for iOS or so, there's like dozens of different sub areas of iOS that one can focus on. And when a talk accommodates for that, it means that any talk can essentially be at most on a depth level of like an introductory tutorial for a specific area, or maybe like a WWDC video, which is like Apple developer videos that they publish for the conference every year. So when I go to a conference, I pretty much just go for the hallway track to meet people, either to meet old friends with some conferences or to also meet new people and, compare notes. But I'm also like over time with age, I've become less in the idle part because everybody's just figuring stuff out.
Right, so you got the job at Google, you're in Munich, and then I guess still you weren't, not fully satisfied with the experience, but I guess what was that like then working for Google? How long did you work for them? And then there still must have been an itch, because we wouldn't be sitting here today if you didn't have that itch to say, hey, I still want to do my own stuff, kind of.
Yeah, I had a great time at Google. It's great colleagues, great office, great food, great pay. So really nothing to complain there, and it was a really cool time. And I really learned a lot because turns out studying mathematics actually means that there is some stuff in computer science that you need to learn, like proper computer engineering, like proper version control, testing, code reviews, and so on. Right. I really learned a lot, especially like in the first 1.5 years. But I did already have the apps from the side, and originally, if I hadn't applied to Apple and Google, I would probably have just done that right after my studies anyway. But it was always in the back of my mind, and after some time at Google, I also realized that getting promoted essentially is something that is a bit out of your control in big tech and so on. And there's always a disconnect between your personal performance and, your
the
career.
Perception of your performance, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and also how it impacts your career. Like sometimes it doesn't matter whether you put in 50% or 100%. You're not going to advance any faster. So essentially, I waited until I got promoted. Which happened after about 1.75 years, mostly because they only promote or have promotion sessions twice a year. But I figured at that point they pretty much even if I have to apply for a job later, nobody could say he was too bad at Google because he got promoted there.
Right.
So, and then essentially waited till the start of the next year when my annual bonus would come due, and handed my resignation in 3 months before that.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, makes sense. Interesting. But you handed in the resignation, but knowing already that you wanted now to fully focus on the next thing you were working on.
Yes. So I still had the apps, and they were doing fine-ish, pretty much somewhat constant, surprisingly, even without me spending too much time on them while I was at Google.
When you say the apps, we were talking now about timing already, and right. So that means even when you started working at Google, you already in parallel you were working on your own apps as a side project, so to speak.
Yeah. So Pocket CAS, the computer algebra system, the calculator, that came out in 2009, fall of 2009, and the timing app came out in summer of 2011. So that was mostly to see how much time I spent building Pocket CAS. There actually was a app that for Windows that I previously used back when I was on Windows that I really liked, but I didn't find anything to my liking for Mac. There were a couple of cool ideas, but they had bad performance or some stuff that I didn't like. So I felt if I like that, maybe someone else could use it as well. So I had already built timing back then, which was quite limited back then, also just because I didn't know any better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
when you, by the way, because you mentioned early on, it was because originally you wanted to track the time you spent building Pocket CAS. Is that it?
That is correct. Yeah.
Right. So it was literally for fulfilling that need to find out.
Yeah, pretty much. I like that app on Windows, and just knowing where my time went. So I had that, and I think both of the apps were doing okay-ish while I was at Google. I didn't spend much time on them, but kind of coasting along. But back then, actually, Pocket CAS was doing better financially than timing. But I get more enthusiastic feedback from timing users, but also with a lot of stuff that the app simply wasn't prepared to do for technical limitations. After I left Google, I essentially spent like a few months bringing both apps a bit back to speed because I kind of neglected them for 2 years. And then I spent 13 months rebuilding Timing from scratch, like version 2 that was a proper rewrite.
Before we get into it, just a tiny second, just to get that straight. The beginning of Timing, you built it, you published it on the App Store, and it just kind of worked. Or did you back then as a sort of a second iteration think, I need to spend maybe a tiny bit more on marketing back in the day, or distributed kind of, or otherwise, how did you get your first 10 users back then for Timing?
Yeah, I think also that was pretty much on the Mac App Store. I mean, actually the Mac App Store was quite new back then, which means also fewer competition. And also back then, I think it actually had more visitors than it would have these days.
Right.
Because like nobody talks about the Mac App Store.
And also
anyway.
the naming is probably right. I mean, for a Timing app to be called Timing, and people found it back then with much less competition, I guess. And
yeah. I mean, I don't know whether people search for timing or time tracking, but you could put in keywords. And I mean, back then, I think my marketing was pretty much like being on the Mac App Store, having a small website, but the website originally didn't do as much. I mean, the Mac App Store certainly helped me like get that off the ground and kickstart that. But also by the time I left Google, I also realized that I got more and more traffic actually from my website. For example, originally I was only on the Mac App Store, but with Timing 2 that would actually not be possible due to technical limitations on the Mac App Store. So to see whether it would actually be viable at all to sell software outside the Mac App Store, I mean, who knows? Because back then the Mac App Store was the only thing I knew, although they have been Mac developers from even before the Mac App Store times, right? What I did was I also put like a payment form on my website and handle licensing that way, just to see how many people came then from both. And when I put both buttons next to each other, like buy from me or buy from the Mac App Store, it was about a 50-50 split.
Right.
But I think when I removed the buy from the Mac App Store button, it was more of a 90-10 split, like 90% direct sales anyway, which made me realize I'm no longer losing out that much on the by not being on the Mac App Store.
Right.
But that already was me being like in business for 5 years, having been recommended on some blogs, doing not completely badly in searches on Google. So that gave me some feeling that.
And also the App Store takes a 30% cut for every sale, right? Just in terms of mentally and in terms of, I mean, let's call it hustling. When you had these two apps and you said you kind of neglected them while at Google, but how do I have to mention your work week in terms of, so you went to a 40-hour work day and then still had to spend, I don't know, your evenings or your weekends on at least minimally maintaining these two applications? Or how much work back then did you put in to have these two running in a very minimal state?
Back then, I think it was actually not that much work. I think it was a bit of support. I mean, maybe every couple months releasing an update. I mean, I don't quite remember, but I guess I could look at the change logs of my apps from back then and see what I did. I mean, because for the longest time, I actually had the change log going all the way back to version 1.0. on my website. So that's quite a long website. But I think I didn't spend that much there. In the summer of 2015, after I got my promotion, I did reduce to a 4-day work week. So essentially like 80% at Google. And I think then I spent a bit more time on the apps, but even then not fully. Again, long distance relationship and so on. And so I really only get back into work after leaving Google. Also, the HR person wasn't super surprised when I handed in my resignation. She said, like, yeah, people reducing to 80% is usually a precursor to them eventually leaving. So,
right, interesting. All right, okay. So then you left, you handed in the resignation, and then you mentioned there was a 13-month period where you tried to hammer out Timing version 2.
Yes. And in retrospect, I realized after releasing version 2 that was quite a risky move, 13 months of, just investing in that one thing without knowing whether it will work. But I mean, the good part was that even while at Google, my other apps were already a bit of ramen profitable. So I could basically survive them. I had some savings as well. And I mean, worst case, I could go back to Google. Like I left on good terms. So there was a lot of safety nets in place already, which really helps with, just trying something new. But yeah, it was 13 months of heads down, being in code all day. Bit of a intense, lonely period, if that makes sense. So.
It does, yeah. What was the vision for Timing to version 2? I mean, what was the big goal that you wanted to achieve by rewriting it?
Yeah, so version 1 was, essentially version 1 of Timing didn't even have a concept of I did this at this exact second. Essentially, I think it aggregated the times only on a per hour basis, which, funny enough, I think is what Apple's screen time still does these days, which was more efficient database-wise, kind of. But it also meant that I couldn't give you a timeline of your day, of what you did in any given minute and stuff like that. It also made it much more difficult to, for example, enter manually create time entries. Like back then, I did that, or I had a meeting at that time. I think I had a basic version of that in Timing version 1, but so essentially there was definitely a ceiling to how far this technology could get me. Mm-hmm. And a big part of the rewrite was like switching to an architecture where every activity that you do is its own element with like a clearly defined start and end time, even if it's only a few seconds. Mm-hmm. And then taking advantage of that by, drawing a timeline of your day, making suggestions to automatically create time entries. Because, for example, if you bill your time, I think it still makes sense to manually create time entries, just so that all the small gaps that are really, really difficult to all assign to that project, because it's kind of a boil the ocean thing. There are so many small activities. Right. If you just create a time entry, you say I worked from 2 p.m. till 4 p.m. for that client. It makes things way easier. But I at least wanted to reduce the friction of creating those time entries by suggesting them, that kind of stuff.
Was that fueled by user feedback already?
Yes.
Right. So you had tons of feedback pouring in?
Yeah. So and that's also what made me double down on Timing and not Pocket CAS, even though Pocket CAS was doing better financially back then. But users were like, Timing is so great, I only wish it could. And a lot of this was also very similar. Like at least it rhymed, and it all came down to this technical limitation and not having a timeline, not having manual time entries. So I felt like a lot of the frustrations that my users were feeling, even though they were already loving Timing, was what I could address with that rewrite.
Interesting. Did it by accident happen to be then a 13-month rewrite? I mean, or could you have made it in like shorter releases, so to speak? I mean,
that's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I think it was more a bit of a thing. Like it took as long as it took. Uh-huh. I mean, I'm glad it didn't take any longer. But given that I had to really rewrite the app from scratch, and also I think I started using Swift mostly for the new version and so on. I think releasing that piece by piece wouldn't have been possible. I mean, maybe I could have done it in 10 months or so. But I mean, sometimes also the good part is if you don't know any better or don't know how long this is going to take you, or if you knew how long it would take, you wouldn't even start it. Yep. So, yeah.
Just emotionally, what does that feel like? Because I can imagine then, I mean, so you went from having colleagues and in the office, so to speak, to, I guess, your home office. You sat at home, and then you nuked more than a year into it. I mean, which means coding every day, I don't know, 8 hours or whatever it was. And there is no boss coming to you and saying, hey, this is now finished or it's not finished. I mean, how did you keep the motivation to do so?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is the kind of stuff where I don't have a perfect answer. I mean, I already did my apps kind of at home, even while I was studying and during the holidays. So I was a bit used to that way of working already. And I mean, back then it didn't bother me much. I mean, I'm also more of an introverted person anyway, so being by myself isn't a problem. I kind of knew where I wanted to go, or had a lot of ideas, and I wouldn't even say that I'm super disciplined. I also think that these guides like Tim Cook wakes up at 5 a.m. So I should wake up at 5 a.m. and to go to the gym to be successful, because that's why Tim Cook is successful. Right. I feel like this kind of stuff is not not easy to transfer. Yep. For me, just trying to build cool stuff or stuff that I liked and that I wanted to see exist, or and like just the joy of building has always been motivating anyway. And from that, the discipline never was an issue. I mean, prioritizing the right things is certainly an issue, but still is, if that makes sense, because I still like to more build the stuff that I wanted to build rather than the stuff that would be best for the company sometimes.
And then, so let's say it's 1 day minus the release date, 1 day before the release date. You put everything in, you build the, final deliverable, so to speak, kind of. You're going to release tomorrow, version 2. What's going on through your mind? I mean, how did it feel? How did that feel? And what happened?
To be honest, I don't quite remember anymore how I felt before that. I do remember that I think I was quite well prepared. Like I did. I invested a lot into this period and version 2. But also I do feel like it. I gave it the best shot that I could. For example, like. I think eventually I decided I'm going to release on that day, and that was like 2 months out already. And at that point, I started reaching out to the press, like, to Apple bloggers and so on. I feel like back then actually that made more of an impact than it does these days. And got a lot of reporting on release day. Also, it was quite a lot of legwork, and that was, I feel like, the first time. I mean, I can't say for certain because it's been a long time, but I feel like that was the first time when I took marketing seriously, and did all the hustling. And also, for example, I built my own licensing system for version 2. And that I actually, I did have quite a few beta users at the time. Also because I had the Timing 1 user base who were excited about Timing 2. And, just getting feedback from them. I mean, like the very first versions of Timing 2 were very rough, and they looked very different from what the final version looked like. I think actually I still have a post on the Timing blog out about like the history of Timing 2 with all the alpha and beta versions, and like even with screenshots. I mean, to be honest, I hope the screenshots on the blog still work. Haven't checked that in a while. But it evolved quite a bit over this period from being almost unusable and way too complex to something that people could use. I mean, the app is still complex. It's and discoverability and not overwhelming first users has always been a challenge for me. But I did test the licensing system with the beta users. So essentially, I told them the next beta version will require a license. You can for now get a license for free. By like kind of faking the payment process, and those licenses will expire when the final version comes out. But that also meant that I had like a good confidence that everything was working well.
How big of an audience do you have? How many beta users, just roughly? I mean, are we talking dozens or 5 friends or 100 or?
I don't remember, to be honest. Yeah. I would say it would be around 100 or something like that. I mean, with beta users, the problem is always we might have 100 people on the list, but 10 of them will actually install every beta, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And although I don't remember quite how the day before the launch felt, I can tell you a bit about how the launch day felt. Right. That was definitely exhilarating and exhausting. I think I also decided to like put a chat widget on the landing page.
Right.
And people were sending messages through that all day. And I think I spent all day, working, answering support requests and so on from like whatever, 8, 9 a.m., don't remember, till like 10 or 11 p.m. So it definitely was a whirlwind. And even the days after that were a lot of stuff. And I think shortly after that, I think I was at UIConf in Berlin. And I actually booked a vacation for in 2 weeks, which was quite short notice for me. And it was then also remember feeling like really looking forward to that, because I felt like, okay, now I really need a vacation kind of, after having all of this released, having a successful release.
And did you notice it in sales numbers? I mean, did the first day then just go whoosh?
Yeah. I mean, like it was a paid upgrade anyway. And the first day of version 2 was, and also the first month, was way better than Timing 1 ever did. And I mean, luckily after that, like the baseline that it kind of settled down to was also higher than with what Timing 1 was at before that. I mean, also back then I figured like, okay, now let me get Timing 2 out. And I mean, I already had 2 apps, right? Timing and the calculator. Yeah. So I was more thinking of myself as like building a portfolio of apps. But Timing 2 did well enough that I figured like I'm just gonna keep building on that for a while longer. And yeah, been 8 years. So
it's been 8 years. I find that so fascinating in hindsight. Right, good launch. You've figured out, hey, you can live on that and continue doing it. Were there any doubts at any point that this could fail or this could kind of? Was it all just like, as you just told me, kind of smooth sailing, or were there any nagging doubts ever along the process?
Well, I do remember, quite a bit of, or I was a bit scared the moments before I was about to tell my manager that I'm going to leave at Google. So I think that's like a big life decision. I think everybody would be a bit scared and intimidated by that. I do remember that. But I also felt like, again, there's been so many safety nets. I mean, worst thing that could happen would be going back to Google, which is really pretty good fallback. And I think eventually, only either shortly before or after the release, I also realized, like, well, that was 13 months of your life.
Yeah.
Glad it worked out, I guess. But I mean, and again, back then I was already ramen profitable. It wouldn't have been enough to save or put anything back for retirement. So I knew that it would need to go up over time.
Right.
But I mean, I also like built version 2 in the hopes of things going up over time. And so
did you build version 2 then also maybe in the back of your mind that when you said portfolio that it was meant to not just maybe reset the baseline to something higher, but then also be able to support at some point then a whole team and grow as a company of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people? Was that already in the back of your mind?
I think back then it didn't really cross my mind.
Right.
But
so you were doing everything solo essentially. I mean,
pretty much, I think. But back then it's been so long. I don't remember what my thinking there was. I also wasn't the person to write lengthy design documents or plan documents for the apps. I did collaborate with a designer for the icon of version 2, of course, and get a bit of help there. But back then it was pretty much really just a one-man show.
Right, yeah. And then, so what happened after version 2 came out in terms of what was then the next long-term milestone, so to say?
Yeah, so version 2 came out, and I mean, like, of course, even version 2 wasn't perfect, far from it. I mean, I keep getting asked by people like, a time tracking app. I mean, I guess that's done eventually. And I always say, well, at any given point in time, I already have like enough ideas to fill a 5-year roadmap, if that makes sense.
A 5-year roadmap, okay, yeah.
Which is not to say that I have a 5-year roadmap, but I think I would have like 5 years worth of stuff that I could do, if that makes sense. And after version 2, the next big thing for me was syncing. Because you may have multiple Macs, you might be spending time on all of them. You want to get an aggregate picture of those. For me, syncing always felt like a super daunting thing. Because so many things can go wrong. You want to have a consistent state everywhere. You need to know what's on a device, what isn't. That was another several months project. But at least this time I had the confidence that I already been through stuff like that before. But yeah, I spent a lot of time researching that, thinking that through, and also re-architecting the app to actually allow syncing with the database structure. So the way it works is it mostly tracks whatever you do in the app and whatever it tracks as like a kind of a logbook. And then to get to the same state on another computer, it kind of replays all these entries in the same order and does that like in both directions, kind of. And for example, a challenge with timing was also that it can generate up to a couple of thousand records per day, which is not like the handful of records that you deal with in a normal time tracking app, specifically because timing also tracks all your activities. And so it also needed to work efficiently, just like a basic high overhead syncing solution might work for a simple app, but wouldn't have done it there. So I did a lot of stuff custom built back then. But overall, I think the sync has been very reliable in the last 7 years. I mean, it was definitely quite an engineering, quite a lot of engineering work, but it's also been serving me well.
The way you formulated, it seems though that you were pretty engineering heavy all the time, or did you ever take breaks where you said, hey, I need to have a UX re-release kind of and really rethink from a user experience perspective how people should interact with the app? I mean, was that ever on your mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I do remember working with a designer, I think for version 2 or for some bit of a redesign a bit after that. I don't quite remember, but most of these were on the milder side, if that makes sense. If you look at Timing 2 in 2017 and look at it now, I think you can definitely see the same genes still. It can be a bit daunting, but on the other hand, I also haven't found like good ways to perfectly hide that complexity. And I mean, maybe it would be time for a bigger redesign. On the other hand, I also have a lot of users who like the current approach and would be unhappy with a different one. What I do though is I sometimes take a bit when there's like, for example, now with macOS 26 and Liquid Glass, I took that a bit as a step back to, tweak a bit of some of the interactions, make sure that everything is looks nice and is arranged well. It wasn't a major change, especially on the older operating systems, but I do feel like the Liquid Glass design has inspired me to do a bit more of the small design tweaks and so on. Like no major redesign, but just trying to make sure that things look the best they can.
And then fast forward a tiny bit. I guess now 8 years later. What happened to Timing over the last 7 years? Then where are we now? Where are we today with it?
Yeah, good question. So a big milestone was switching from like the sketch model, which means like 12 months of free updates, and then you can buy a discounted update license, to full-on subscriptions. First only for new customers and later on also for renewing customers. Because I did see the writing on the wall with like the Timing's revenue going down again after the big launch. And I felt like that subscriptions are the only way these days to really sustain development. And also if you want to grow the company, if you want to expand your ambition, it's everything else is just like twice as difficult. So
did you ever have any lashback, by the way? Because I mean, also when we do license changes and whatever here at JetBrains, I mean, there's always people who would rather not like to see these changes happening. Back then, you just again said, oh, well, this is where we need to go, and then that's it. I mean, did it just work out like that?
I feel like overall user sentiment has changed quite a lot over the last 10 years. I mean, I think over time, simply more and more things became subscriptions, and the general user has just come to terms with that. So after introducing subscriptions for new customers, I mean, that's also, I mean, I kind of introduced it softly only to new customers without telling the existing users, because it wouldn't affect them for a much longer time anyway. And with the users who upgraded, a lot of them were already used to paying every year for sync anyway. And I think those were mostly the loyal users for whom Timing is essentially part of their business, and who are thus also fine with paying for that. And
with any of these decisions, I mean, be it licensing, or be it whatever, did you effectively try and figure out all that yourself? Did you have maybe your wife or as a sparring partner? Did you have other people where you just, I don't know, other business people who you cross-checked with and said, hey, what do you think about it? How did that come about, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, like my wife is definitely a sparring partner, and I appreciated talking to her also just like from an emotional standpoint, and just as like to bounce ideas off and also just clear my mind. I also really liked going to, and still like going to MicroConf, which is like a conference series for bootstrap software as a service companies, and they are pretty much everyone is subscription anyway.
Yes, yeah. I've been to MicroConf in Dubrovnik. It must have been 5 or 6 years ago. That was my last time at MicroConf, the MicroConf Europe.
I've also only been to MicroConf Europe. I think I went in 2016 and in 2017. After that, I took a break for a while, also because like the hotel choice in 2017 was problematic. Like they had essentially like a hallway with marble walls, floor and ceiling, which means that the sound reflection were pretty terrible. And for someone who goes to conferences to talk to people on the hallway,
right.
That was a bit off-putting. And then the pandemic happened. I did go back to MicroConf also in Dubrovnik, I think at the same hotel last year. I had a really great time there. And so I actually also went to like an event of theirs in London this spring, and also like this year's iteration in Istanbul. Never gotten around to the
US?
To the US version. Would have liked to go for a while, but at the moment it's not at the top of my mind.
My takeaway back then was that I found it super interesting. See, especially when you come from from an engineering background, then people always use the latest and greatest technologies and try to be really up to date on that front. And when you go to MicroConf and you see how much business, how much money people make with very simple tech solutions kind of to actual business needs, that was just very, very cool to see. And even the so-called Excel VBA script-based businesses and whatever, there's a ton of stuff which you wouldn't imagine. And out there you always think, hey, I need to be in the latest version of React or whatever. It's just a very nice change in angles, so to speak, when you go to MicroConf.
Yes, and I feel like I really like that business angle. Also, like just talking to people there, you don't talk about the tech, but more about the more fundamental stuff, which I also really like. And as you say, sometimes even not or a low tech solution for the right market can do tremendously well. For example, they also have like a VC fund called Tiny Seed, and they invest into B2B, mostly bootstrap startups as like a seed investment. It's a lot of like a CRM for gyms or whatever, for all the verticals that you can imagine. I mean, like this year in Istanbul, I met someone who built a CRM for jewelers.
Okay.
So there's so many niches, and when you just serve these customers well, and especially better than the existing solutions, some of them, which are even lower tech than what you're about to build, you can serve those people well, and they will be very happy, and they are also more willing to pay, especially like in general focusing on B2B is way easier, way more lucrative than B2C. And my apps are pretty much always somewhere in the middle between B2C and B2B, and it's definitely harder to build a business that way than with focusing on B2B right away.
Speaking about your apps again, you mentioned Cotypist at the beginning. Can we dig into how Cotypist came about? How did that happen? Was it also something just like Timer, just kind of happened from the previous product, so to speak?
That one was also really a bit of scratching my own itch. So, I mean, I think back in 2021 or 2022, GitHub Copilot was released. Back then, it was literally just AI autocomplete in Visual Studio Code for like the end of the line, maybe the next couple lines. And even back then, I really loved it already and was quite impressed with how good it already was. I mean, it couldn't write like whole files at once, but even just speeding up like a lot of the predictable stuff, I found super useful. And I also eventually found myself copying my support requests into Visual Studio Code, like pasting in the support request, then a double new line, 3 dashes as kind of like a separation marker, and then double new lines again, and then start typing my reply. Just because I wanted the autocomplete.
Right.
For writing support requests, even though the model was supposed to emit code, it wasn't quite bad as emitting prose either. But I felt like there must be a better way for that, like a less clunky way with optimized for text and so on. And so I experimented with that a couple of years ago. I mean, back then the models were simply not capable of doing this kind of stuff. And also there was no way of running them efficiently. But then the first Llama models came out, Mistral and so on, and more after that. And eventually it started working.
Which means you also now heavily still use AI, by the way, to do support stuff and everything else. I mean, is your business and your coding heavily AI based nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, like, so I still am the only support person in the business, because a lot of the trivial stuff, like how do I get my account and so on, I try to automate away with like self-serve forms and so on, which means that a lot of the questions, the support questions that remain are more on the technical side anyway. So the support person wouldn't be well equipped to handle them, and it also gives me a good pulse of what people want, or what their needs are, and in general how they feel about the app. Which can also be very motivating when people tell you that they're very happy with your product. I feel like that's also been a core driver of why I've been building them, just this motivation of seeing that people really enjoy it. And so, but in terms of support requests, I mean, also the support tool I use you can essentially easily replay any previous answer, and for the stuff that is repetitive, that has been very useful even before AI. But I also use Cotypist to auto-complete the support stuff a couple words at a time. But mostly these are still kind of handwritten and hand thought out by me, if that makes sense. So no fill in the request and then try to have an AI chatbot fully generate a message. Right. Maybe that works better these days, but support doesn't take me that long, especially with Cotypist. Like I have it complete several hundred words for me on many days, and I still feel like it's important to do that yourself, especially because it's not that much. And for AI coding, I also use Claude Code, Cursor, Codex a lot, and a large portion of the code that I create these days is not handwritten, but written by AI. Mostly, telling the AI, I want this, you need to be careful about that. And
do you fully trust the code? I mean, or do you, have extensive review cycles in between to just figure out, hey, this is not quite what it should be doing?
Even before that, I already reviewed everything before I committed it. And for example, also with my small team that I now have, we have code reviews, which I also kind of adopted from Google. Actually, the code review tool that we use, it was created by an ex-Googler who also found that kind of Google's code review tool was so good and nothing on the market was there, that he created a copy of that for public consumption. Right. And I also review my own code, and that includes AI code. Some of the tests I may be a bit less diligent about, as long as they mostly look reasonable. And also we have a lot of tests to verify this kind of functionality anyway. But the production code I definitely review and double check that it works. And you have to be careful and diligent about it not messing up the architecture too much. But the good part is also that it's kind of like a power tools. They like a big instead of a shovel, you have like a digging machine. Which also means that you can do refactorings much easier with the help of AI. So essentially, if the files get too large because of AI keeps piling onto that file, you can also tell AI to split it. But in general, I review that kind of stuff. There has also been like prototypes or like auxiliary code for experiments or for stuff code that doesn't get shipped, but is more to prepare custom data, where I completely vibe code it. I just tell the model, I need this, and it will write a Python script. And I'm not a very good Python programmer anyway, but they're also I trust it enough to roughly do what I need. And if the final result works, then the code doesn't matter.
Yeah. The code doesn't matter. It's well said. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah, but only for these special. But and that's like pretty much pure vibe coding. Because I think the definition of vibe coding that I heard and from Simon Willison, who I really recommend, he has a blog about AI and so on, and it's for me the pretty much the best and most insightful source you can get on AI these days.
Simon Willison.
Or I would say that he was one of the major people who contributed to terming the term vibe coding, and for him it's like having the AI write the code and not look at the code at all. And I do that for some small side projects or demo apps. Or for example, I have an app that lets me plot my runs, distance versus speed or speed versus heart rate and so on. And that's completely vibe coded also. Just had Cursor generated, installed it on my iPhone. it does exactly that, does what I need. If I want a new feature, I tell the AI to create that new feature, but it's not intended for public consumption. I don't care about the code. It's like the impact of something going wrong there is very limited. Yeah. So in general, the higher the stakes, the more careful you have to be, of course.
Yeah. Just briefly going back to Cotypist, because I mean, by then 2020 or whatever it was, 2021, the market had changed. So it's not just like pushing out something to the App Store and just hoping it will work. Did you have a change in approach when it comes to then marketing or launching or distributing, again, finding users essentially for Cotypist? Did something change in your approach?
I must admit that actually I have been much more diligent about marketing and finding users back for the Timing 2 launch than for Cotypist. Also, technically, Cotypist hasn't officially launched yet. I mean, it's early access. Anybody can download it from the website by entering their email address. But it's not like officially launched with a product hunt launch and the official V1 and big announcement and so on. And the way I get users there was first invite a couple of friends, then mention it in passing on the Timing newsletter, also because I just wanted to, slowly test the waters without, kind of spurning you or burning your launch fuel, if that makes sense, and kind of keeping the powder dry in that regard. And also for a while, I put it a bit more on the back burner because I felt, okay, it's useful to me, but maybe it's not as useful to other people. But then actually someone, like a developer friend of mine, mentioned it on his own app's newsletter, which also got some users from that. So, and then someone actually created a video about it, I think towards the end of last year or early this year. So it did kind of develop a life on its own. Like nothing super viral yet, but enough for me to kind of keep going and to keep pushing at it. And actually right now I'm trying to give a bit more responsibility on timing to my team. I mean, of course, me still orchestrating everything, but having the team do stuff where previously I felt compelled to be involved myself. Also had a Mac developer start recently who I can hand over more stuff to.
Right. And how big is your team now?
It's one Mac developer who will be like almost full-time starting next month. Currently still part-time. A part-time web developer and a part-time marketing director. And with some freelance help in terms of writing articles for our blog or designs as needed on an hourly basis.
And when you just said, I mean, maybe get them to do stuff, is your plan, I mean, just the vision in general, I don't know, have even more products then and making it all bigger? Or do you have some sort of a 10-year, 15-year, just some random vision of where you want to go?
I've never been that much of the roadmap or even vision guy. I mean, so the questions you ask, like how did you go towards version 2? I mean, back then I guess I must have had some sort of vision in mind of where I want to go now. But as my wife tends to say, I only tackle a project when I know that I can do it. So, which actually means that I'm not the grand 10-year ambitious guy. It's more like one step at a time. And I mean, for the longest time, it's been only timing, and I've been content with that until I felt like compelled that Cotypist needs to exist. But now I do feel a bit stretched thin with 2 products, and I have no grandiose idea for a 3rd product. So for the time being, it's like full on focus on Timing and Cotypist.
When you look at your journey now, even though you didn't have maybe the grand vision back then, but now looking back, if someone wanted to follow your steps, your footsteps, what would you say is kind of the biggest sort of, I don't know, advice, wisdom, anything you would give them? If I was now today a developer here at JetBrains at Google, I wanted to hand in my resignation for whatever reason, what would you tell them to do?
Yeah, that's one of these difficult questions again, because I feel like every journey is different, and I also made things up as I went. And it also really helps just having existed in 2011 or having started in 2011, which is hard to replicate. And also, again, back then, the App Store and Mac App Store helped. But also a lot of the people from the MicroConf community, what they recommend is I think useful. And they even have books and courses on that, like the SaaS Playbook and I think a SaaS Launchpad course, stuff like that. I would definitely recommend to read those and maybe get the video course as well. And a lot of that is actually validation before you start building too much. Like do customer validation, whatever, run Google ads, tell your friends, try to see whether you can reach these people at all, because like if you can't reach them now, why do you think you would have any better chance of reaching them later?
Yeah, once you nuked a year's development time into it. Yeah, exactly.
So again, I'm not the best to follow my own advice there, but in general, like focus on marketing and finding customers. And again, also B2B is way easier than B2C, because you just need way fewer customers to achieve the same level of revenue. And those customers, because their businesses, are usually much more willing to pay than consumers.
Mm-hmm. I saw online from a few creators that they said for them it makes sense to maybe have a week of coding and then a week of marketing, a pure business development. Would you have some sort of, again, just rough guidelines when you started? Because most engineers, obviously, they start out with 100% coding and 0 or 1% marketing or whatever. Do you have any percentage in mind where that should be going instead, ideally?
I must admit that I'm also a bit too much on the coding side still, or again, especially after, in 2017 that was a bit different, and I think that helped to have timing to give a good launch. But these days it's a bit more on the coding side, and I haven't been doing enough marketing for Cotypist, for example. I can't give a good split, but in general, even if you don't like doing the marketing or if it feels hard, that's, I guess, even more of a reason to push more on it, push yourself. And I also don't do weekly. I do something here and there, but sometimes it can help to just say, this week I will do marketing and I won't touch the code, especially in terms of discipline, because otherwise there's always the code like distracting you, and suddenly you spend the whole week and only did like one marketing thing. So I think it has the potential to help with that, especially in terms of focus and making sure that you kind of eat the frog and with the stuff that you enjoy doing less, and like put it front and center.
Mm-hmm. By the way, what part of the success do you think stems from purely being in the Mac ecosystem? Because back then I saw, maybe it was in Hacker News, where people published an app, maybe some markdown writing app for Mac only, and wanted, I don't know, $20, $30, whatever it was. And people said, it's unbelievable. It only works in the Mac ecosystem. On Windows or Linux, they wouldn't ever pay, the users just wouldn't be paying for it. Whereas for Mac, it always seemed like people are more willing to pay, kind of. Is that something that you also felt was the case?
I think so. Especially like 10, 15 years ago, I think the Mac users, they were more willing to pay for software. Also, like kind of artisan software. Back then there was a lot of different small apps with like, and each had its own character, kind of also the character of the founder. And I guess on Windows, the willingness to pay is less. On the other hand, the market is also much larger. And I know that there's also a lot of indie developers of Windows apps, always has been. So I think it's possible there as well. But that being said, these days, I think it's actually easier because the web is much more of a distribution platform anyway. And I think these days, a lot of businesses don't need a native or desktop app at all anymore, just a web app. And on the web, you can just charge a subscription. People will be used to it, also because it's like it needs to be hosted by you anyway. So in that regard, I would say that the web in general, but also specifically having your product on the web kind of removes this distinction and like fuzzes over these distinctions and these differences.
And maybe last but not least, one topic I forgot early on, because we talked about validating customer needs before you write a single line of code. And then I also see people fixate on, it might be the perfect way of naming certain things. It might be the perfect, legal structure and entity and all that sort of stuff. Again, is that something that just then happened along the way for you, kind of? And you would tell people, instead of fixating about all of this, try to get the first 100 customers and users for your product, right?
Yes. Good points. It's way easy to procrastinate by perfectionism or by getting into this, and I'm also prone to that myself, at least sometimes. But yeah, I think names don't matter. There is a company called Google, which is like one of the largest in the world. I don't think that's like a particular creative name. And I mean, like some companies spend a lot on naming, and sometimes it can be useful. I think Vercel and so on, they hired a consultant to help them with their name. I think that guy was also on Lenny's podcast recently, which I also listened to and recommend, provided I'm allowed to give recommendations for other podcasts.
Sure, yeah.
So yes, you can do that, but you can do that way later. At the beginning, it doesn't matter. I mean, like literally, in the Objective-C language, you usually prefix your classes with 2 letters for kind of as like, these are my classes. And the prefix for timing has been TR since the very beginning. And TR doesn't stand for timing; it stands for timer, because that is or time tracker or whatever. I don't remember, because that before I even had like a name, that's how I started. You don't have to have a name before you start. If you feel like you spend days on the name, then you're doing it from the wrong end. And you can just start now, and you can always rename it later. It's find and replace isn't that difficult, and the AI makes it even easier. Also with legal structure, if you have a very specific thing in mind, like if you want to get venture capital, then it matters more. But if you just want an app or just want to build a business, then it's easy to get started. And also these days, I feel like with ChatGPT, there is even fewer excuses to get started than before, because ChatGPT can help you with so much, like aggregate everything that you need. For example, I'm also really a big fan of ChatGPT's thinking mode. Especially for when I know that a Google search won't give me like the first result that will be what I need, or when I know I would need to consult multiple pages, multiple sites to get what I want. I just tell ChatGPT, look this up for me, and this will give me a nice report. And these days, for me, it's pretty much always been accurate. Like hallucinations are not really a thing with the thinking mode, I feel like. And you can tell it, what do I need to start a business in Germany? Like what forums, who do I need to tell, how do I need to get started? And then you just follow these steps, or sometimes even the AI can help you follow the steps. It's not that difficult.
It's not that difficult, but it's still, as you said, easy to procrastinate and thinking you're actually working by, ruminating about these things which don't matter too much. But thank you for the tips and tricks out there. So people just get going, do something. Yeah.
Also, there's this saying, like, now that intelligence is on tap, because like kind of the AIs, they give it to you like a faucet. Agency is what matters more. And so just do things.
Right. So we're coming towards the end, which means it is time for me to announce, first of all, the raffle, because we have a license raffle going on, which means we're always asking a guest a question, an estimation question. Whoever gets closest to the real final answer, we're going to announce the winner. And actually, we're going to announce the previous winners also of the previous raffle soon in a unified video. Now, Daniel, which brings us to a question you might have. Is there anything in mind you would like to have an answer for? I mean, for the audience.
I think a good question could be the number of commits and the main timing for Mac repository since the start, essentially, or since whenever I have still have records, which should be either 2011 or 2013, sometime around that.
2011, 2013. Okay, so the number of commits in the last, let's say, 12, 13, 14 years in the timing Mac repository.
Yes, on the core Mac app.
On the core Mac. Right,
that's also easily verifiable for me. So
easily verifiable. Okay, then folks, put in your number as a comment down below the video. We'll get Daniel to double check them, and whoever gets closest, you'll get a license. Right.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. That brings us to the end, which is rapid fire questions. Today, because people know who are kind of consistent listeners, we always have rapid fire questions which combine the country of the person that they're from with the topic. Today, Daniel is actually from Munich, from around Munich. Is German, I'm German, so ChatGPT wasn't as creative as it usually is, but nevertheless. First question, if Cotypist had a personality, what kind of German would it be? In terms of maybe the state or the region.
Good question. I would say it would be more of Lower Saxony, a bit on the bland side, if that makes sense.
All right.
My apps have never been like in general, I try to be not overly quirky with my apps, if that makes sense. More of a efficient, down to earth part, and I think that would make sense. Like for example, North Rhine-Westphalia is more known for being very outgoing, which I think would not apply. Bavarians are a bit more on the harsh side sometimes.
Right.
So I think
Lower Saxony could make sense.
Yeah, Lower Saxony, Hamburg, somewhere around that. Like more on the neutral side, if that makes sense.
Right.
Maybe Swabia, but Swabia is also a bit too quirky.
All right. Okay, got it. The most Daniel bug you've ever introduced?
Oh well. Nothing specific comes to mind, I think, but it would probably have been some premature performance optimization, which then broke some stuff later on that was hard to realize. That would be the kind of bug that I would write. Right. If that makes sense.
Maybe the biggest indie development myth. Is there any sort of myth you think that people have when it comes to indie or small development?
Build it and they will come.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. Maybe the last one. Where, if you want to, can people find about your work, follow you, find your products? And now is the time to basically tell people to check out everything.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most important thing is right now is to spread the word about Cotypist. Mm-hmm. So that's cotypist.app. Just go to the website, enter your email address, and try out the beta. It's free, and so there's nothing to lose. And you can always unsubscribe from the newsletter if you want to. And my other app is Timing, timingapp.com. And I am on X as Daniel_A_A for historical reasons.
Right. Naming doesn't matter. You're right,
yeah? Yeah. Well, I mean, I must admit, I'm not very active posting on social media. I also have a Mastodon account where I think I pretty much never posted. Right. And also even X, I read more on X than I consume. And if actually someone wants to get in touch with me, I think the best way is actually through the support forms on either the Cotypist or Timing website. That is more likely than trying to direct message me on X, because on X often the notifications get stuck and then I might notice it. So,
right. Daniel, thank you very much for sharing the story. I always find it super fascinating. I wish you the best of not luck, but a very bright future with Cotypist and all the other stuff you're doing. And thank you very much for being here.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.